Assalamu alaikum everyone and welcome back. Today we will explore the beginnings of English literature, Anglo-Saxon literature, also known as Old English literature. Before we start, let me ask you a quick question. Imagine a scenario. If you had to pass down just one story, poem or a song to future generations, but without writing it, just by memorizing it, what should you do? Which story are you going to choose and why? Take a few seconds to think about it. This will help us imagine what storytelling meant in Anglo-Saxon world where literature lived through memory and performances alone. Now, I want you to picture this. It's 1,000 years ago and you're sitting in a grand hall. The fire is crackling, warriors are gathered, and a poet, called a Scop here, stands to recite verses. There are no books or printed pages. Stories live through those memories and voices alone. If the poet forgets, the story vanishes. If he performs well, it survives for generations. Doesn't it sound like a scene right out of a medieval fantasy, like Lord of the Rings or The Witcher? These fantasies are actually inspired by actual history of Anglo-Saxon time period. This was a world where English literature began, oral, communal, and deeply tied to our faith and identity. You might be wondering, why should we care about a literature that's outdated? It's 1,000 years old. The truth is, many of its themes are surprisingly modern. The Anglo-Saxons wrestled with questions we still ask today. Why do we face death? What makes someone heroic? How do we find meaning in a world ruled by uncertainties like our current time period? Think of Beowulf, a story about courage, loyalty, and sacrifices. These values echo in today's films, novels, and even superhero stories like The Iron Man or The Avenger. Or take poems like The Wanderer or The Seafarers, pirate stories. They explore loneliness, exile, and the search for belonging, a search for home. Isn't that something we can all relate to in our own lives? So, Anglo-Saxon literature isn't just a relic of the past. It's a mirror that still reflects our human struggles and aspirations today. With that image in mind, let's step into the topic, Anglo-Saxon literature, the foundation of literary history. The historical background. To understand Anglo-Saxon time period, it's important to know the need to place it into a historical context. The Anglo-Saxons were Germanic tribes. They were a tribe that consisted of different subcategories or sub-tribes like the Angles, the Saxons, and the Jutes, who settled in Britain from the 5th century onward after the fall of the great Roman Empire. Their language, Old English, was the foundation of modern English that we use today. Though it looks and sounds very different from the English that we are speaking today, but the English that we can speak today is influenced by it. So, in that time period, the very first question is literacy. The percentage of people who are educated or who can read was quite rare. Much of the early culture was oral because people could not read and write. Stories, poems, and histories were memorized and recited for those who did not understand the written text. Monks later began writing them down, which is why so much of what survives today has a Christian tone. So, talking about Anglo-Saxon literature, it is an amalgamation of pagan and Christian sensibility. Pagan is a term used by early Christians for people who believe in multiple deities or gods. This mixture of oral pagan traditions and Christian monastic influences is central to Anglo-Saxon literature. Next, let's study the characteristics of Anglo-Saxon literature. Anglo-Saxon literature has distinct features that set it apart from anything that we know today. First is oral and alliterative style of writing. poetry relied heavily on alliteration, the rising of your voice, and not just rhythm and rhyme, the way you spoke, the way you enunciated a pronunciation, like I'm doing right now. Instead of rhyming couplets, Anglo-Saxon poems used repeating sounds to create rhythm. For example, fierce fought the fearless fighters. F sound is being repeated here. Second, themes of heroism and fate were mostly explored, like our modern day stories of Harry Potter or maybe hero stories like the Avengers. You can draw the comparison over there. So, when it comes to a central concept of heroism, it was about what is the meaning of fate and destiny. Characters often struggle bravely, knowing their lives are ruled by forces beyond their control. They can die any moment, yet they were heroic. Third, there was a blend of pagan and Christian ideas. Many works praise heroic deeds and warrior codes, but also contain Christian moral lessons. For example, a pagan hero might be framed as a figure guided by divine providence. Fourth, elegiac tone. Much Anglo-Saxon poetry is somber, reflecting on loss, exile, and the brevity of life, losing something in your everyday life. The sense of melancholy when you lose someone very dear to you. It runs deep in these works, like The Wanderer and The Seafarer. These stories reflect on people who do not have a home, who are homeless. Lastly, this literature also relied heavily on the use of kennings. A kenning is a metaphorical compound word consisting of two words basically. Compound words are amalgamation of words, such as railroad. It was used for the sea, and interestingly, another one is bone house for the body. Like our skeleton was how they reflected on human body. This was a stylistic hallmark in Old English poetry. So, next question is, who were the major writers and major works of that time period? When it comes to author, it's a muddy ground because we do not have their names. They have been lost to time, but we do have certain texts that were written by them. We also have certain writers, but it's still a question. Were they really the original authors or not? And since it's been 1,000 years, we cannot actually confirm much. So now let's begin with key texts. First is the most famous one, the original English epic, Beowulf, the most famous Anglo-Saxon poem and the oldest surviving epic in English language. It tells the story of the hero Beowulf, who battles the monsters Grendel and Grendel's mother, and later a dragon. So, the original story of a dragon came from Beowulf. The poem explores heroism, loyalty, and fate, and also the inevitable decline of human life. No one stays forever. It reflects both warrior culture and Christian moral interpretation. Second famous work includes the Exeter Book of Poetry Collection. It's a manuscript containing a variety of shorter poems and riddles. The Wanderer and the Seafarer are two well-known elegies expressing themes of exile, loss, and spiritual yearning. The riddles show wit and creativity, giving us glimpses into everyday Anglo-Saxon life through playful metaphors. Third are the religious texts that survived in poetry form. First is the works of Caedmon. He is considered the earliest known English poet. He composed cowherd stories that were about divine vision. Imagine a shepherd having divine interpretation and having a connection with God. That's what Caedmon was doing. Works attributed to poets like Cynewulf are also surviving today. They blend biblical stories with Old English poetic style. So, heroism combined with morals. Then fourth there are certain prose works. So, you might be questioning, what are prose? Prose are the simplest form of language. They are simple sentences, like right now I'm using prose. I'm not using poetry with you guys. So, not all Anglo-Saxon literature was poetry. King Alfred the Great one of the most famous rulers of the time period, promoted learning and translations of Latin texts into Old English, and his most famous collection is the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles. A historical record it is a major prose achievement documenting events year by year. You can say it's a history book with a sprinkle of imagination and fantasy. So why should we study Anglo-Saxon literature today? Why is it so important to consume Anglo-Saxon literature? Obviously, you must have drawn certain parallels with today's media, but let's give it another look. It gives us insight into the earliest form of English language. It shows us the roots of themes that still appear in literature, like heroism, bravery, mortality, the fear of death, the struggle between good and evil. It helps us see how cultures blend and adapt over time. As pagan traditions met Christian faith, how was it influenced? Most importantly, it connects us to the timeless human concern of loss, courage, and what is the meaning of life? Why are we still alive? Why do we believe in certain things and why do we negate other things? To sum up, Anglo-Saxon literature is the foundation of English literature and English literary history as we know it today. It reflects a society caught between war and the battle of faith. It also questioned about what it means to believe in destiny and what it means to hope for a better future. Works like Beowulf, The Wanderer, and Caedmon's Hymns remain powerful not only because of their historical significance, but because they still speak to our deepest human questions. Why are we still alive? Why are we doing the things we are? Why do we still feel lonely sometimes? And what it means to be truly homeless. We will see how English literature evolves from these beginnings into Middle Ages and beyond in our upcoming lectures. Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned a little bit about Old English literature. Thank you, everyone.